I knew I'd texted the wrong number when the reply read, "I think you meant to send that to someone else." I didn't know I'd changed my life until the next message arrived. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Followed 3 minutes later by a notification that $5,000 had just landed in my account from a stranger who signed simply Jackson. The apartment was one room pretending to be three. The fridge hummed like an apology, the heater rattled like a tired drumline, and the streetlight slashed a crooked band across the carpet that doubled as Noah's play area. He was on the mattress beside me, cheeks flushed, fists flexing at the air, the way hungry babies fight the invisible. I had meant to text my brother, one more humiliating request for $50 to make it to Friday. My thumb, treacherous from lack of sleep, hit one wrong digit. Send. I read my original plea back in the blue bubble glow. "Ben, I'm sorry. I need $50 for formula. I'll pay you back. The sentence ended in white space because desperation runs out of grammar. The reply came while I was measuring water into the last scoop of powdered formula and pretending not to know it would be too thin. "I can help. No strings." Then the second message. "Check your app." I checked because disbelief is a ritual. The number on the screen was so solid it made my breath go strange. For a full minute I just stared, as if looking long enough might reveal the trick. None did. I typed with clumsy thumbs. "This is too much. I asked for $50. "Who are you?" "Jackson," he wrote. "Not important tonight. Feed your son." I read it again. Then I fed my son. Hot water, careful wrist tests, the good bottle, the one that didn't leak if you screwed the ring to the exact fraction of a turn it preferred. Noah, latched like relief, had a mouth. His eyes went fluttery at the corners. Milk dribbled onto the foxes printed on his blanket, and I wiped it with a thumb that wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't until he finished and fell asleep with the heavy abandon of the newly satisfied that I let myself cry. Not when the car had been towed, not when daycare had closed with a polite email, not when the landlord taped a red notice on the door like a scarlet letter for our hallway. I cried because a stranger had bent reality in my direction, and I didn't know what to do with gentleness that came without an invoice. When my lungs remembered how to behave, I texted, "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I know," came back. "I wanted to." The next message jarred me upright. "Is Noah allergic to anything?" I hadn't typed his name. My heart clenched. I scrolled the thread again. Nowhere. Then memory snapped into place. The unsent draft to my brother did say his name. The wrong number had been the second text. I let myself breathe, but not all the way. "No allergies," I typed. Then, because pride is a coat that keeps you warm even when it's threadbare, "I'll pay you back. Pay it forward when you can. And send me the formula brand he tolerates best," he wrote. "Supplies are better than cash." My thumb hovered. Accepting money from a stranger was one line. Accepting baby things felt like stepping over another I didn't know how to redraw. But I was a mother before I was anything else. I sent the brand, the ounce count, the slow flow nipple he preferred, the ridiculous little details that own your brain when your world has collapsed to two people and a grocery list. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Questions chased each other in circles until they blurred. Who is Jackson? Why me? What does no strings even mean in a world where everything is attached to something? The knock came an hour later. Not the landlord's impatient thud, a soft, practiced tap. No one knocked here. They shouted through doors or sent texts at odd hours. I slid the chain and opened to a delivery driver dwarfed by a dolly stacked with boxes. "Delivery for Mira Jensen." I signed my last name in a hand that looked steadier than I felt, and he wheeled kindness into my living room. 4 boxes, then 6. Tape winked under yellow light as I cut it with a butter knife from the dish drainer. Inside formula, the expensive brand I always stared at and didn't touch. Diapers in sizes that predicted a future where my son would keep growing. Wipes, bottles, gentle soap that smelled like clouds, a baby monitor more sophisticated than my phone, blackout curtains in a fabric that felt like a soft apology from the world. At the bottom of one box, an envelope. No letterhead, just a note, plain and careful. "He deserves better than scraping by. Sleep tonight. Jackson. Suspicion and gratitude braided themselves at the base of my throat. People don't do this. Not with no camera, not with no angle. I waited for the catch like you wait for pain at the dentist. Jaw tight, muscles braced. Nothing caught. I took a picture of Noah asleep with a fox ear under his cheek and sent it. He's full. Thank you. Good. Came back. That's how babies should be. I sat cross-legged on the carpet in the center of my reconfigured life and opened a browser. Curiosity isn't always wise, but it's faithful. Jackson became Jackson Albright, courtesy of predictive text. The search results built a cathedral I'd never enter. Helix Core Industries. Valuation, $11 billion. Media shy. Widowed. No children. Photos of him walking out of buildings with glass facades and more light than my entire block sees in a month. In one picture, he was leaning toward a microphone with the resigned grace of a man who knows he's going to be asked the wrong question and intends to answer the right one anyway. My stomach did something that wasn't a flip so much as a recalibration. I glanced at the boxes like they might sprout embossed seals. My thumbs hovered above the screen and then made a choice. Are you the Helix Core Jackson? Dots blinked, stopped, blinked again. Yes, he wrote, but that's not useful information for you tonight. Then what is? I asked, surprising myself. A longer pause. Tomorrow. Come to Helix at 11. Ask for Ava. Not a test, a conversation. Wear what lets you breathe. The laugh that escaped me sounded like a person I used to be. I don't have a suit. We don't manufacture those, he wrote. We manufacture precision. Bring yourself. I stared at the message until the words softened. A job offer? From a man whose net worth had commas where my life had blanks? It could be a trap. It could be a test. It could be a story I'd tell myself when the rent notice visited again. Why me? I sent. Because you asked for exactly what you needed, he wrote back, and because you sounded like someone who would make good use of being believed. I didn't trust it. I wanted to. There's a difference. Noah stirred and whimpered, and I tucked the fox ear back beneath his palm. We're okay tonight, I whispered, the sentence strange and glorious in my mouth. We're okay. I cleaned in the way you do when your soul needs evidence. Tossed the collection of ketchup packets I'd been saving as if sauce could be currency. Scrubbed the stove until it looked like something a person with options might own. Folded the 2 good towels into squares with right angles. Hung the blackout curtains and stood still while the room learned what quiet felt like. Sometime after midnight, I sent one more message. If this is a social experiment, I'm stealing the curtains. Fair, he replied, but it's not. Sleep. I did. Not the anxious doze that breaks every hour to check the time, but the deep kind that wraps you tight and leaves a crease on your cheek when you wake. Morning arrived with the complicated decency of sunlight on cheap curtains, gentler than it had to be. I dressed with deliberate, work-like motions, clean jeans, a blouse with buttons that still negotiated, a blazer that remembered a version of me who once signed in at labs and calibrated machines and took pride in precise decimals. I pulled my hair back. I kissed the soft place at Noah's temple and told him we had an appointment with the future. Outside, the wind had teeth, but the sky had kindness. I strapped him into the carrier and took the bus because the subway feels like a decision, more than a ride, when you're carrying your whole life in a diaper bag. Downtown, towers judge their reflections in each other. People with lanyards and caffeinated purpose moved in flows like schools of fish. I felt obvious and invisible at once. The lobby at Helix Core was all light and plants and quiet money. A receptionist with a face that could sell sincerity looked up as if we were exactly the people she expected to see. Mira Jensen? She asked. Yes, I said, and it came out steadier than I deserved. Mr. Albright is finishing a call. Ava will meet you at the elevator. She handed me a visitor badge. My name was spelled right. You'd be surprised what that can do to a person. Ava Lynn materialized at the 37th floor with the easy confidence of someone too competent to notice she's intimidating. You must be Mira, she said, and her smile was the kind that doesn't condescend. And you must be Noah. He gurgled like he agreed. She led us past glass-walled rooms that held people whose jobs had titles you could not explain to your grandmother. We stopped before a door labeled with nothing. "I'll give you 5 minutes," she said. "Then I'll rescue you if he's being insufferable." "You rescue him often?" I asked. "Daily," she said lightly, and opened the door. He was there, less polished than the pictures, more present. No tie, sleeves rolled, the kind of tire that looks like discipline instead of defeat. The city unfurled behind him through the windows, like a living graph. "Mira," he said, as if we'd met before. In a way, we had. "Jackson," I said, because pretending otherwise felt silly. We looked at each other for a heartbeat that held more than politeness. Then he glanced down at Noah and something in his face shifted. Not softness, something steadier. Recognition, maybe. He nodded toward the glass wall across the hall. "We repurposed that old mother's room into a nursery last night," he said. "Crib, changing table, blackout curtains. You won't need the curtains, though." His mouth edged toward a smile. "You already stole a pair." "I warned you," I said. "You did." He gestured to a chair. "Can we talk?" We could. We did. He told me he needed someone unallied and meticulous to look at numbers that were telling a story nobody wanted to hear. I told him I needed a job that didn't require me to be less of a mother to be more of a person. He told me he didn't do charity. I told him I didn't do gratitude performances. He told me he believed in return on investment when the asset is character. I laughed because being seen like that felt like a luxury item and a necessity at once. No contracts, not yet. A trial, a set of credentials, a key card. Trust extended like a hand across a gap that had no bridge yesterday. When it was done, I walked to the glass room that had become a nursery and laid Noah in the crib beneath a ceiling, painted with constellations someone had loved years ago. He kicked at air and grinned at the invisible. I stood there with a visitor badge on my chest, a new key card warm in my palm, and a text thread in my pocket that read like a fairy tale if fairy tales had spreadsheets. On the elevator down, I caught our reflection. Woman, baby, bag. This was still my life. It was also something else now, something I hadn't had in a while, the beginning of a plan. On the sidewalk, the city resumed its volume without consulting me. That felt right. I tucked the key card into my wallet and tightened the carrier straps. "Okay, little fox," I murmured to Noah. "Let's see what the right-wrong number can do." We turned toward the bus stop in a future that had just cracked its door. Helix Core smelled like clean ambition, ozone from polished screens, lemon oil on the desks, and a faint undertone of coffee and nerves. It was the kind of place where even silence sounded expensive. I stood in the lobby with Noah strapped to my chest, pretending I belonged while trying to keep my heartbeat from showing through my shirt. Ava guided me through hallways that shimmered with glass and light. "You'll get used to the reflections," she said with a knowing smile. "Around here, you'll see yourself from every angle before you see anyone else." She led me into a modest office tucked behind a wall of living greenery. A sleek desk, a soft chair, and a laptop already open to a Helix Core audit dashboard. My name blinked in the corner of the screen. "Welcome, Mira Jensen, temporary analyst access granted." "Jackson believes in trial by immersion," Ava said. "You'll have access to limited data for now, financials from one department. Think of it as a sandbox." "Is this paid?" I asked, too aware of how my voice sounded. Ava's smile deepened. "Generously, direct deposit. You'll see it by the end of the day." I didn't know what to say, so I said the thing that mattered most. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. He doesn't do charity." She tapped her badge against the glass door. "He does believe." The door closed behind her, and for a moment I stood still, breathing the recycled air of a life I hadn't planned for. Noah stirred against me, murmuring the kind of half-sigh that says, "You've got this, Mom." I hoped he was right. The first task was simple enough. Reconcile vendor statements with internal transactions. Numbers are polite. They don't lie unless someone tells them to. Within 2 hours, I saw something odd. Tiny overpayments in separate departments, recurring every 3 months, always just below the threshold that would trigger an audit. $4,130 here, $4,175 there. Small enough to hide, consistent enough to mean something. The vendor name, Trinox Solutions, appeared across different cost centers with identical descriptions. Consulting services. I checked the system. No website, no tax ID on file, no human contact. Just an account number that seemed to hum wrong when you looked too long. By 1 p.m., my curiosity had eaten through professionalism. I typed an internal memo draft and hesitated over the recipient line. Jackson's name was there. I hovered, then pressed send. The reply came within 5 minutes. Come up. The top floor looked like another planet. Ava's desk greeted me first. She glanced up from her tablet, her eyebrows lifting in amusement. He's expecting you. Try not to apologize too much. He hates that. I stepped into Jackson's office. He stood by the window, sleeves rolled, jacket draped over the chair. The city framed him like a reminder that some people built their own gravity. Tell me what you found, he said without preamble. I explained the payments, the vendor pattern, the missing identifiers. He listened with his head slightly tilted, eyes fixed not on me, but somewhere beyond the numbers, as though seeing the whole shape of the puzzle before I'd finished describing the edges. When I stopped talking, he asked, "Why did you look deeper?" Because it didn't make sense, I said. It felt like someone was trying too hard to stay invisible. He smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Most people would have logged it and moved on. I don't have that luxury, I said. That earned me a glance sharp enough to cut through glass. Neither do I. He turned his screen toward me. Trinox Solutions, he murmured. Been trying to find that ghost for months. You just mapped its heartbeat. My mouth went dry. You already knew? I suspected. Couldn't prove it. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You found it in 2 hours. Beginner's luck, I said. Or something rarer. His tone softened. When you've had to account for every cent, you start seeing what others ignore. That's not luck, Mira. That's survival turned into precision. The words hit deeper than they should have. I didn't know what to do with kindness dressed as assessment. So what happens now, I asked. Now, he said, you keep digging. Quietly. I'll give you deeper access. Don't tell anyone. And if you see the name Vincent Harmon, you come to me first. Who's Vincent Harmon? Our CFO, he said, with a smile that didn't need an explanation. By 4 p.m., the office buzzed with a rhythm I'd started to understand. People here walked like they had coordinates. Screens blinked like constellations of progress. I stayed at my borrowed desk long after my shift ended, tracing payment trails through databases that were supposed to be airtight. The deeper I went, the more patterns emerged. Each transaction had the same digital signature, an approval timestamp linked to an administrative account that didn't exist anymore, deleted last quarter. But the approvals had continued. Someone had built a ghost inside the system and let it move money like wind through curtains. A chill crawled up my spine. When I finally looked up, the office was nearly empty. Even the cleaning crew had passed me by. I closed my laptop, stretched, and reached for Noah's carrier. He blinked up at me with milk-heavy eyes, unimpressed by the magnitude of corporate crime. Mommy's new job is weird, I whispered. The elevator doors opened to an empty lobby. But before I reached the exit, a voice said, "You work for Jackson now?" I turned. A man stood by the reception desk, tall, immaculate, smile like glass. His badge read, V. Harmon. I'm just helping with audit reports, I said carefully. Ah, the single mother, he said lightly, as if it were an anecdote rather than a fact. He's very charitable these days. My throat tightened. It's a job, not charity. He laughed, the kind of sound that makes you wish you hadn't given anyone a reason to laugh. Of course. We all start somewhere. He studied Noah with detached curiosity. Cute kid. Thanks. Do me a favor, he said, voice lowering. When you finish your little report, send me a copy. Jackson tends to get distracted. I like keeping things efficient. I nodded because it was easier than arguing, but the moment I stepped outside, I texted Jackson. Your CFO knows about me. The reply came seconds later. He shouldn't. Go home. Don't answer any more questions tonight. Back in the apartment, I bolted the door twice. The boxes from the night before still sat stacked against the wall, unopened except for the formula. I made a bottle by muscle memory and rocked Noah until the tension in my shoulders finally melted into something human. My phone buzzed. Ava. You okay? Jackson said to check in. Fine, I typed. Just tired. Good. You'll get used to it. The truth is heavy, but you learn how to carry it. Her words lingered as I stared out the window at the bruised glow of the city. Somewhere up there, in an office wrapped in glass, a man with more power than I could fathom had decided to trust me with something dangerous. And somewhere else, another man with two perfect teeth and too smooth charm had decided to notice me for reasons that made my stomach turn. I looked down at Noah, warm and breathing steady, the anchor that kept my panic from drifting too far. Sleep, little fox, I whispered. Mommy's learning how to fight in numbers now. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the quiet beginning of a war. One waged not with weapons or words, but with data, silence, and the courage to believe a stranger when he said no strings attached. The next morning, Helix Core didn't feel like a workplace. It felt like a stage where every sound was being recorded for someone else's replay. The air was too clear, the smiles too careful. Even the elevators seemed to pause longer between floors, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Ava met me at the entrance, coffee in hand, a second cup already waiting for me. Drink, she said, pressing it into my palm before I could protest. You'll need it. Why? I asked. She gave a small, dry smile. Vincent's been walking around like a man rehearsing his own eulogy, which means he's about to write someone else's. I blinked. He knows something? He always knows something. The trick is figuring out if it's true. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. Stay invisible today. I nodded, but staying invisible had never been one of my strengths. By mid-morning, I was knee-deep in transaction histories again, following the thread of Trinox solutions through Helix's veins. It wasn't a single account, it was a network. Each department had its own consultant version of Trinox, sometimes renamed, sometimes slightly reworded, but all with the same metadata signature beneath the surface. Every one of those entries was approved by a chain that ended in Vincent Harmon's credentials. But what made my skin prickle wasn't the money, it was the timing. Each payout aligned with quarterly reports, rounding out profit margins just enough to make Helix look perfectly healthy. The company wasn't bleeding money, it was laundering trust. A message popped up on my screen. Jackson, office, now. He stood at the window again when I arrived, the skyline behind him fading into fog. He turned slowly, face unreadable. What do you have? I slid a flash drive across his desk. Proof that Trinox isn't a ghost. It's a parasite. Every transaction leads back to Harmon. He's been moving funds through multiple shadow accounts and patching quarterly reports to hide it. Jackson's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. How much? Estimated $32 million over 3 years. He didn't flinch. And he's still drawing salary. That's not all, Kaki, I continued. He's routing the money through different branches to make it look like legitimate external consulting. No audits, no oversight, all internal approvals. If you hadn't hired me, he'd have another clean quarter. Jackson walked around the desk, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of cedar and steel on his jacket. And you're sure? I triple-checked. There's no mistake. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, you realize what happens if we expose him. I nodded. Helix takes a hit. Stocks drop. Board questions your judgment. And if we don't, then you're complicit. His gaze flicked up, sharp, assessing. You don't hesitate much, do you? I've had to make faster choices with worse consequences, I said. At least this one has a spreadsheet. That earned me a small, surprised smile. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. There's something I want you to see. He pulled up a secure file on his tablet, corporate board messages, flagged and redacted. Vincent's already trying to position me as negligent. He's claiming Helix's charity projects, which is what he's calling the daycare initiative, the free coding program, and incidentally your hiring, are diversions of company funds. My stomach dropped. He's trying to paint me as a liability. He's trying to paint me as sentimental, Jackson corrected. You're just the prop. The thought burned worse than fear. What are you going to do? Not panic, he said simply. And neither will you. I'll have Keller reach out. Who's Keller? A forensic accountant who consults for the board. She's the only person I trust to untangle this without alerting Vincent. I frowned. You trust me? He hesitated, then nodded. I do, but Keller's the kind of insurance even trust needs. When Keller called that afternoon, her voice was clipped and professional, the sound of someone who counted facts instead of breaths. This is the analyst Jackson mentioned? Yes, I said. Good. Send me your files. Encrypted. Label them weather report. It's an internal code. He'll understand. Is this safe to discuss on open channels? It's never safe, she replied. But danger's the cost of progress. And Ms. Jensen, don't underestimate Vincent. Men like him get sloppy right before they get desperate. Her words lingered after the line went dead. Desperate men don't make clean exits. At lunch, Ava slid into the chair across from me in the cafeteria, her tray untouched. You've got the look. What look? The one people get before they do something that changes their life. I'm not doing anything dramatic, I said, stabbing a piece of overcooked pasta. Then you're in the wrong company, she said with a smirk. Jackson doesn't hire for calm. He hires for chaos he can trust. Does he trust you? Her smile dimmed slightly. Enough to tell me what he's fighting. Not enough to tell me what he's afraid of. What is he afraid of? She tilted her head. The answer to that depends on whether you're part of his problem or his solution. Before I could ask more, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expression tightening. Speak of the devil. CFO's on the move. Vincent, she nodded. He just called an unscheduled finance meeting. My guess? He's tightening the narrative. About what? About you. The meeting was already in progress by the time Jackson and I arrived. The air was electric. Board members dialing in, mid-level execs whispering like it was a funeral with microphones. Vincent stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, voice smooth and confident. And as I've mentioned, he was saying, recent audit irregularities appear to stem from temporary staff assignments, misclassified entries, unsecured files, and questionable data manipulation. Nothing malicious, of course, but carelessness at this scale could compromise quarterly stability. The room murmured approval. Corporate fear always loves calm villains. Jackson didn't bother sitting. So you're saying the system's integrity was compromised by a temporary analyst? Vincent turned slowly, eyes gleaming. I'm saying our system has vulnerabilities that need oversight, and perhaps better hiring practices. The pause that followed was a test. Jackson passed it with terrifying grace. Funny, he said evenly, because the vulnerabilities she found lead directly to your office. A ripple went through the room. Vincent smiled, but the color behind his collar betrayed him. That's a bold accusation. Not an accusation, Jackson said, sliding a flash drive across the table. An audit trail. The silence that followed was surgical. You could almost hear reputations being recalculated. Vincent didn't touch the drive. You've overstepped. Then prove it, Jackson said, voice dropping to something deadly quiet. Open it, right now. Vincent's hand twitched, but he didn't move. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks and smiled. If you want theatrics, Jackson, perhaps you should stick to philanthropy. The meeting ended without a conclusion, because real wars never end in conference rooms. They end later, in the quiet spaces where consequences are drawn. That evening, I left through the back exit, avoiding the main lobby. The sun had already melted behind the skyline, leaving streaks of gold bleeding into dusk. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You shouldn't be here, the message read. My pulse quickened. Who is this? I typed. Someone who's been watching you search for ghosts. Trinox isn't your problem. Walk away. I froze on the sidewalk. My first instinct was fear. The second was anger. I took a deep breath and replied, I don't walk away. I fix things. No response. The city lights flickered to life, and I realized the game had changed. This wasn't a story about kindness anymore. It was about survival. When I got home, Noah was already asleep in his crib, tiny chest rising and falling under the fox blanket. I brushed his hair and whispered, You're why I won't back down. The phone vibrated again, this time from Jackson. You all right? Keller says Vincent's making calls. I'm fine, I wrote, but someone just texted me. Save it. Don't reply again. We'll trace it tomorrow. I hesitated before replying. He told me to walk away. Jackson's answer came fast. Good, that means you're close. For the first time since this began, I smiled. Because fear, when named, turns into fuel. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, low and deliberate, like a warning whispered between gods. When the storm hit that night, it didn't start with thunder. It started with silence, the kind that crawls across your walls and waits for you to notice. Noah slept through it, his little breaths even and soft. But I couldn't. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, screen black, a mirror reflecting everything I didn't want to see. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight of being in too deep. The anonymous text still lingered in my mind. You shouldn't be here. Maybe they were right. But I wasn't wired for retreat. At 2 a.m., a message finally arrived. Not from the unknown number, this time from Keller. We're moving. Jackson briefed me. Remote audit protocol starting at 7 a.m. Do not use company Wi-Fi. Air gap everything. Back up your files. Encrypt twice. Then call me. The message was signed with her trademark line. Paper doesn't lie. I didn't sleep after that. I printed everything. Transaction logs, approval chains, timestamp histories, the paper trail of a digital betrayal. By dawn, the apartment looked like a storm of evidence. Helix Corps' headquarters glistened under the morning rain. Security was tighter than usual. Extra guards, random badge checks. Every camera lens felt like an eye trained on me. Ava met me in the hallway, her expression unreadable. They pulled system access for half the finance department last night, she whispered. Vincent's claiming a cyber breach. Convenient timing, I said. Too convenient. She tilted her head, scanning the corridor. You still have your access? For now. Then don't waste it. Keller's team is waiting for your data drop. Her voice carried that familiar blend of calm and warning, like a pilot describing turbulence without wanting to alarm the passengers. Keller's instructions were surgical. Isolate the Trinox pathways, duplicate the ghost credentials, and timestamp the collisions. I worked like my life depended on it, because at that point, it did. By noon, I'd found it, an impossible log. 2 user IDs, Finance Admin 3 and V Harmon, executed approvals within the same 1-second window, both from the same device signature. Physically impossible unless one of them was a clone. I snapped a photo, printed it, and sent the encrypted copy to Keller. Her reply came within minutes. That's it. That's your linchpin. Sit tight. I didn't have time to sit tight. At 1:17 p.m., Vincent summoned me to conference room B. He was already there when I arrived, standing beside the window, with his reflection caught between glass and arrogance. Mira, he said smoothly, do you have a moment? Apparently, I said. He gestured toward the chair across from him. You've been working closely with Jackson. I admire your initiative. I didn't sit. If this is about my audit, oh, it's about far more than that. He smiled, sharp and false. You're new here, so you might not understand how delicate corporate ecosystems are. One small imbalance, one wrong number, and the whole thing collapses. I crossed my arms. Then maybe you should stop shaking the foundation. His smile flickered. Careful. You don't know the game you're playing. No, I said. I know exactly what I'm playing, and I know what you've stolen. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think Jackson's your savior? He's using you. You're the distraction he needs while he buries his own tracks. That's not true, isn't it? He said, studying my face. He's been moving money too, Mira. The only difference is he hides behind people like you. People with nothing left to lose. For a moment, doubt flickered in my chest, cold and poisonous. Then I remembered the formula boxes, the Fox blanket, the nursery on the 37th floor. Whatever Jackson's flaws, deceit wasn't one of them. Vincent saw the decision in my face. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. When this falls apart, don't expect anyone to protect you. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. By 3 p.m., Keller's call came through. He's desperate, she said without greeting. We have confirmation. Vincent's accounts tie directly to 3 offshore shells, but he's also trying to spin this internally. Claims he found you accessing restricted data. He's framing me. Yes, but he overplayed. We're tracking him through the same ghost credentials he created. Then what's next? Now, she said, we make him move. We bait him. The bait came in the form of a memo, a fake internal announcement Keller drafted and Jackson approved. Subject, internal audit realignment, executive vendor review scheduled. We uploaded it to a shared drive that Vincent monitored obsessively. Within an hour, the logs showed access from his terminal. 2 hours later, another set of ghost approvals appeared, one approving a $750,000 consulting payment to Trinox. Keller's voice crackled through my earpiece. He's taking the bait. Don't interfere. Let it process. I watched the line of numbers flow across my screen, the digits burning themselves into my brain like a confession. And then, sudden stillness. Vincent's system access vanished. Jackson's voice came over the line next. He's trying to wipe the servers. We're locking him out. It happened fast. Security swept through the building. It quarantined networks. The finance wing was sealed off like a crime scene. Employees whispered as uniformed investigators moved through the halls, collecting devices and sealing evidence bags. Ava appeared beside me, calm as ever. You need to leave, she said softly. I'm not hiding. This isn't about hiding, she said. It's about surviving the fallout. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Jackson stepped out. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his eyes were steady. Vincent's in custody, he said. We found offshore accounts, fake vendors, everything. He turned to me. You did it, Mira. Relief hit me so hard it almost hurt. Then it's over. Not quite, he said. He's already leaked partial data to the board. He's claiming I authorized his payments. He's trying to drag me down with him. Can he? Only if we let him. That night, Keller set up a secure video call. The three of us, her, Jackson, and me, looked like conspirators from a noir film, faces lit by the cold glow of screens. The AG's office will move fast once they have our documentation, Keller said. But the board needs to see transparency. Mira, your logs are critical. They show dual identity usage under Harmon's credentials. I hesitated. If I testify, Jackson's voice was gentle. You'll have protection. I'll make sure of it. Keller nodded. It's the only way to end this cleanly. But understand this. Once your name's attached to this, anonymity is gone. I glanced toward the crib where Noah slept. The city outside pulsed like a machine breathing. Then let's end it. The next morning, headlines blazed across every feed. Helix Core CFO under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Sources claim insider audit trail triggered internal crisis. They didn't print my name, but they didn't have to. Inside the building, everyone knew. As I walked through the lobby, people parted instinctively, some with admiration, others with suspicion. A few looked at me like I was radioactive. Ava met me by the elevators. You did the impossible, she said. I just followed the math. She smiled. That's the difference between you and everyone else. You followed it all the way to the truth. That evening, Jackson found me in the quiet of the rooftop garden, a rare place in the city where you could still hear the wind. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside me, watching the skyline reflect the setting sun. You know, he said finally, I used to think money solved everything. Then I met someone who reminded me what it's for. To build something that lasts, I guessed. To make something right, he said. And you did. I turned to face him. What now? Now we rebuild, he said. And when this is over, I want you to stay. Not as a contractor, as the head of a new division, internal integrity. The words hit me harder than I expected. Why me? Because you saw the cracks, he said simply, and because you refused to look away. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks at a whisper, but the kind you earn, one scar at a time. The storm outside had passed, but inside me a different kind of thunder remained, the kind that comes before rebuilding. By morning, the story had learned to walk without us. Helix Core CFO under investigation scrolled across every screen I passed on the way to the elevator. Reporters waited in the drizzle outside the lobby like gulls, eyes sharp, questions brighter than their umbrellas. I kept my head down and used the service entrance the way Ava had shown me. A narrow corridor that smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaner, the opposite of drama. Keller called as the elevator hummed up. AG's office wants everything, she said as if ordering takeout. Full logs, device collisions, your memos to Jackson. Don't email, don't message. Hand deliver on a drive I give you. Today? Now. Where? I asked. Not at Helix, she said. Safe house. Jackson will text the address. Pack for 2 days. My breath stuttered. He thinks it's that serious. I don't think, she said. I measure, and the numbers say Vincent will hit back loud. The elevator doors opened on 37. Ava was waiting with a canvas tote, a burner phone, and a key card with a different name printed on the front. Mara Jensen. She raised one eyebrow. Alias Light, she said. Close enough to answer to, different enough to bore a PI. Ava, I said, the question catching in my teeth. Is Jackson okay? Busy, she said, and pretending not to bleed. She walked me to the nursery. I lifted Noah from his crib, felt his warm weight fold against me, the fox blanket slung over my shoulder like a flag. Ava's voice softened. Follow Keller's directions to the letter. Turn off your phone when she says, if the news calls, we were never here. Does it help? I asked. Sometimes you win by being boring, she said, and squeezed my arm once before letting go. The safe house was in a part of town that had never heard of headlines. The building was 3 stories of pale brick with potted plants at the stoop and windows that remembered how to be kind to light. Inside, quiet furniture and thicker locks than you'd expect. A note on the counter in tidy, unsentimental handwriting, Keller's, listed the Wi-Fi as Nope with the password also Nope. My laugh startled me in the empty room. Keller arrived 10 minutes later with a black Pelican case and a face full of sleep deprivation that made her eyes more precise, not less. She set the case on the table, snapped it open, and began laying out drives like a jeweler appraising stones. Everything on these? She asked. I slid over a folder of printed logs and a flash drive. Everything that proves physics hates liars, I said. Keller's mouth tipped, approving. We'll keep that line for the AG. Noah, who had opinions about everyone, studied her from the bouncer and then cooed a verdict. Keller gave him a look both fierce and gentle. He's why we're careful, she said, and for a second I liked her more than my training told me to. We spent 2 hours assembling the package. My logs, Keller's traces, Jackson's authorizations, system snapshots, the memo that baited Vincent into approving a payment to Trinox in real time. Evidence like stairs, each step obvious, difficult to argue with, leading somewhere inevitable. When we were done, Keller handed me the burner phone. This is your number now, she said. If anyone else calls, you don't answer. What about Jackson? He has this number, she said, but he'll use it sparingly. He doesn't want to put a target on you. Someone already did, I said. As long as the target isn't painted by you, she replied. Eat, sleep if you can. I'm taking this to the AG now. A courier will pick up the paper. How will I know anything? You won't, she said, concise as weather. For a few hours, your job is to be a lighthouse. Stay where you are and be bright. She left with the case, and the apartment sagged back into quiet. I fed Noah and told him the world was working on getting its act together. He kicked his socks off and didn't argue. At 2:16 p.m., the burner buzzed. Jay, are you safe? Me. Yes. Safe house is aggressively neutral and smells like lemons. Jay. That's Keller's version of a hug. Me. How are you? A pause long enough to tell me his day was being devoured by men in suits and rooms with bad coffee. Jay. Board split but not hostile. Counsel firm. Press circling. I'm okay. Me. He'll aim at me now. Jay. He already is. He filed an ethics complaint alleging I hired you to falsify audits in exchange for personal support, citing the 5K. I stared at the screen until the words steadied. Then I typed, he made kindness into a receipt. Jay. He made everything into a ledger. Don't engage. We answer with evidence, not posture. Another message landed beneath it, a photo of my device collision printout, lodged in a manila folder. Jay. Your work is the spine. For the first time since I'd met him, I read a sentence of his and wanted to cry. Before I could, the burner rang. Unknown number. I almost declined, then noticed Keller's message had arrived simultaneously. Answer. Put on speaker. Record. I slid to accept. Ms. Jensen, Vincent said. His voice sounded smooth for public consumption. It's Vincent Harmon. I wanted to offer you an opportunity to correct the record before this becomes unpleasant. Hello, Vincent, I said, feeling the surprise of my own calm. Which record? The one where you, a temporary analyst with limited understanding of Helix systems, misinterpreted routine approvals as misconduct, he said. The one where Jackson used you as a shield to divert attention from his own financial irregularities. Big claims, I said. Small evidence. He chuckled like we were at a garden party and I'd startled the roses. I'm prepared to be generous. If you sign a statement clarifying that Jackson directed your review and discouraged you from consulting finance, I can advise the board to pursue administrative corrections rather than criminal charges. Think of your child, Ms. Jensen. The way he said child made the air taste metallic. He has a name, I said. Everyone does, Vincent replied. Not everyone keeps it out of the papers. That did it. I felt the anger take my fears and stack them neatly to one side. No, I said. A beat. Then his voice cooled by 10 degrees. You're making a mistake. I've made worse, I said, but never one that saved a company. He hung up without a goodbye. Keller's text arrived a second later. Perfect. Forwarding the recording to counsel. Stay put. I set the phone down and realized my hands were shaking. Noah, who is a better teacher than most adults, puckered his mouth and sighed at me like I'd just argued with a toaster. You're right, I told him. Food, nap, sanity. We ate, he napped. The city beat its heart against the windows, and I pretended to read a book while my brain sprinted and tripped and sprinted again. At 4:03 p.m., the stately language of corporate war hit the public feed. Helix Corp announces cooperation with authorities in ongoing investigation, appoints interim financial oversight team. We are committed to transparency and accountability, said CEO Jackson Albright. Preliminary internal findings indicate misuse of vendor approvals and unauthorized credential activity. No names, no theater. The comments turned themselves inside out anyway. Some called me a hero without knowing my name. Others called me a schemer without knowing my face. I shut the app. Keller had been right. Decide what you won't read. The burner buzzed again. Ava. Reporters have your building. Don't go home. Jackson goes on camera at 6:30. He wants you nowhere near a microphone for now. Please comply so my ulcer can retire early. Me. Complying. We'll send flowers to your ulcer. Ava. Make them low maintenance. At 5:18 p.m., Keller returned with air like an unfinished plan. She snapped open the Pelican case and took out nothing, then dropped into a chair and pinched the bridge of her nose. AG's office moved faster than expected, she said. Warrants are being drafted. Federal is looped. Vincent's attorney requested a meeting, which means he's nervous. Good. I brought dinner. She hadn't, but she pulled 2 granola bars from her pocket like a kind of apology. We ate hunched over the table like field medics. You did well, she said after a minute. On the call, he wanted you rattled. You stayed in the pocket. I wanted to call him names, I admitted. Feelings are valid. Evidence is admissible, she said and almost smiled. The 6:30 press conference lived on my phone. Jackson at a podium, sleeves rolled, tie missing, voice steady. He said words like mirror and curtains and responsibility in sentences that didn't sound rehearsed because he'd been rehearsing them for 10 years without knowing it. He took 3 questions, declined 20, and walked away before the cameras could turn him into an angle. Keller watched with a blankness that was her version of praise. He didn't give them anything that bleeds, she said. Smart. My phone pinged mid-bite of a granola bar. Unknown. News story drops at 8. Anonymous sources say CEO hired unqualified single mother to run sham audit. Developing. Keller glanced over my shoulder and exhaled through her nose. He's going dirty. He already was. Dirtier, she amended. That narrative's sticky. Is this where we release my name and my CV? I asked, feeling both sick and calm. No, she said. This is where we stay boring. At 8, we give the AG our final packet, including Vincent's attempt to coerce your statement. Then we go to sleep. Let the process metabolize the noise. I wanted action. I got granola. Sometimes that's what integrity looks like. At 7:52 p.m., the burner buzzed one more time. Jay, you okay? Me, I want to dig a trench and refill it with evidence. Jay, that's called a courtroom. We're building it. Thank you for not breaking. Me, thank you for not letting go. A beat. Then, Jay, when this ends, I want to talk to you about staying. Not as a temp, as the person who makes sure we never need this kind of week again. I stared at the screen. The future had walked into the narrative in work boots and no makeup. Me, talk then, survive now. Jay, accurate. Keller did the bedtime rounds like a drill sergeant with compassion. Check the locks, check the drives, check the noise on the street. When she was satisfied, she pointed at the couch. Rest, she said. Tomorrow's a long day, and the rest of your life is longer. After she went to the other room, I lay awake longer than I meant to, listening to Noah's soft dinosaur breaths and the kind of rain that sounds like forgiveness. The day had started with a safe house and a threat. It ended with evidence in the right hands and a public story we hadn't lost control of. We weren't finished. We were at last ahead. I closed my eyes and let that count. The morning after the press conference broke like glass. Too bright, too sharp, the kind of light that makes you wince before you even open your eyes. Keller was already at the table, hair pulled into a knot, her laptop open beside 3 cups of coffee that looked like failed experiments. Don't read the news, she said before I could reach for my phone. I wasn't going to. You were, she said. And if you had, you'd know Vincent was arrested at 5 a.m. I froze halfway to the chair. Arrested? Wire fraud, obstruction, computer tampering? They found the offshore accounts in an apartment full of encrypted drives. Keller glanced up. He's done. I sat down slowly. Done. The word didn't land right. Men like Vincent didn't get done. They reinvented themselves. They hid in plain sight with new titles and new ties. But Keller's face told me this time was different. Jackson? I asked. Still standing, she said. Board met overnight. Reaffirmed confidence. The AG thanked him for his uncompromising transparency, which is code for he bled publicly and smiled for the cameras. Is it over then? Almost. Keller leaned back, eyes narrowing like she was measuring the last inch of danger. He's going to testify before the board this afternoon. You should be there. Me. You're the whistleblower, the human face of integrity. Her tone softened a little. He'll want you in the room. Helix headquarters was quieter than I'd ever seen it. Security checkpoints, temporary press barriers, a sense that everyone was breathing through fabric. When the elevator doors opened on 37, the air itself seemed aware of consequences. Ava met me halfway down the hall. They're waiting in the conference suite, she said. Board, counsel, Jackson. I followed her into a room where glass walls looked out over the gray sprawl of the city. A dozen people sat around the table, their faces calm in that boardroom way that hides fear behind vocabulary. Jackson stood at the far end, no tie, sleeves rolled. He looked up when I entered, and for the first time since that wrong number months ago, I saw something like exhaustion slip beneath his composure. He gave a brief statement, measured, factual, every word built like a bridge over fire. He thanked Keller for her team, acknowledged me as the independent analyst whose diligence revealed the discrepancy, and paused long enough for the board to look at me like they were seeing a necessary ghost. When it was over, he turned to me. Walk with me? We left the boardroom and took the back corridor that led to the sky terrace. The clouds were low enough to touch. Vincent flipped, Jackson said quietly. He's bargaining. Names, files, anything to shorten the sentence. Does he have anything left to trade? He claims he does, Jackson said. Old projects, deals predating your audit, things he says I authorized. You didn't. He smiled faintly. You sound very sure. I checked your ledgers myself. True. He looked out at the skyline, jaw tightening. But sometimes truth isn't enough. People believe whatever version feels simplest. A villain and a savior. They'll always pick the villain first. You could step back for a while, I said carefully. Let Keller handle the cleanup. Let the company breathe. He shook his head. If I step back now, it looks like guilt. And I didn't build Helix to run from it. Something in his voice, quiet, steady, made me realize that for him, this wasn't about reputation. It was about redemption. Then you don't run, I said. He looked at me, really looked, and for a heartbeat the air between us felt charged with the same gravity that had pulled our lives into orbit in the first place. You still plan on leaving after this? I hadn't planned anything, I said. Planning feels dangerous. His mouth curved in something like a smile. You always were honest to a fault. Bad habit. Don't lose it. By afternoon, the board issued its final statement. Helix Core announces structural reform under CEO Jackson Albright. Full cooperation with state and federal authorities continues. A new division, Internal Integrity, will oversee compliance and ethical auditing, led by Interim Director Mira Jensen. My name, in print. Not as a footnote or a witness, but as part of the company. I sat in a quiet conference room reading it 3 times, waiting for the disbelief to fade. Ava found me there. You did it, she said simply. No, I said. We did it. Maybe, she said. But you're the reason this place still has walls. That evening, Jackson called. Not the CEO voice this time, just him. They want you to take the role permanently, he said. And what do you want? I want the same thing I did the night you texted me, he said. For you to stop apologizing for asking for help. I laughed softly. That's still a work in progress. Then stay, he said. Help me fix what's left. It wasn't the offer itself that made me pause. It was the tone. Not authority, not obligation. Partnership. I'll think about it, I said. I'll take that as a maybe. Before he hung up, he added quietly, You made Helix human again. Later, Keller stopped by the safe house for the final debrief. She dropped a stack of signed papers on the table. Official immunity, she said. You're clear. Vincent's confession matches your audit logs. He's accepted a plea deal. 12 years minimum. 12 years, I echoed. That's it? Justice is a long equation, Keller said. It doesn't always balance cleanly, but it balances eventually. She looked around the apartment at the half-folded laundry, the fox blanket draped across the couch, the tired woman who had somehow become part of her case file, and smiled faintly. You did good, Mira. You remind me why we do this work. I thought you did it for the numbers. I did, she said. Then I met you. After she left, I stood by the window watching the city's lights flicker to life. Each one felt like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. Noah stirred in his crib, murmuring softly. I brushed his cheek with my thumb and whispered, It's over. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. Not really. Endings are just the quiet parts between storms. The next day I returned to Helix, not as a visitor, not as a desperate mother clutching her child, but as part of the rebuilding. The security guard at the front desk smiled when he saw my badge. Welcome back, Miss Jensen. The elevator ride to the 37th floor felt different this time. Lighter. When the doors opened, the air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Someone had replaced the old motto plaque by the reception wall with a new one. Helix Core. Building forward honestly. Ava was waiting by the glass wall overlooking the city. You ready for your first day as interim director? Not remotely. Perfect, she said. That's how all the good ones start. In the late afternoon, Jackson stopped by my office. He didn't knock. He just leaned against the doorway with a half smile. Keller told me you turned down the press interviews. I'm tired of being someone's headline. Then let me make it simple, he said. One quote, for the company archive. I rolled my eyes. Fine. What's the question? What do you call what happened here? I thought about it for a long moment. About mistakes that weren't, kindness that turned into consequence, and the strange symmetry of losing everything to find purpose. An accident, I said finally, that refused to stay accidental. He nodded like that was exactly the answer he'd hoped for. Good. Keep that version. It's the truest one. As he left, I noticed a small frame photo he'd left on the corner of my desk. The same one he'd sent before, our first text thread, printed in black and white. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need $50 for baby formula. Underneath, in his handwriting, you paid it back. I sat there for a long time, smiling through the tears I hadn't realized were waiting. Outside, the city was alive again, the storm over, the sky clean. And for the first time in a very long while, I believed in beginnings. The quiet came back gradually, like a neighborhood returning after a parade. Headlines found other villains. The comment sections packed up their pitchforks and went home. Inside Helix, the rhythm shifted from triage to repair, the good kind of repetition. Draft, review, fix. We swapped curtains for mirrors, to use Jackson's phrase. Policies became sentences people actually read. I spent my mornings in the nursery dropping off Noah with the new childcare staff, 3 women with sensible shoes and superpowers. He'd reach for the blocks, I'd kiss the soft spot near his hairline, and we'd both get to work. Go build something honest, I'd whisper, which is exactly what he did with plastic triangles and exactly what I tried to do with human ones. The first week ended with an email from Ava that was so short it felt like an ambush. Subject, Monday's agenda. Item 1, board vote, final. Item 2, offer letter, final. Item 3, cupcakes. When Monday arrived, the board voted. The vote was unanimous. The offer letter was real. The cupcakes were vanilla with ridiculous rainbow sprinkles because Ava refused to let dignity ruin joy. Congratulations, Director Jensen, she said, handing me a napkin like a medal. I thought I was interim, I said, mouthful. You were interim until the sugar, she said. It's binding. I didn't sign in the room with the cupcakes. I took the letter back to my office and read it twice, slowly. Authority lines that mattered, independence clauses that mattered more. The salary was generous without apology. The dotted line led to Jackson's name. I was halfway through writing my acceptance when Keller appeared in the doorway. She never announced herself. She appeared like a well-placed fact. You look like someone who's about to do something irrevocable, she said. I was about to sign. I set the pen down. Will you tell me if I'm making a mistake? Of course, she said. It's my hobby. She came in, closed the door, and perched on the corner of my desk. You'll be the person who says no when yes is expensive. You'll be unpopular at least 3 days a week. Twice a quarter, someone will try to make you smaller so they can keep their comfort. Your wins will be invisible on purpose, and no one will throw you a parade, not even with extra sprinkles. That's a compelling sales pitch. Keller's mouth tilted. And you'll sleep at night. You'll raise a child who learns that power isn't a license. It's a responsibility. You'll get to say we when you talk about fixing something and mean both your home and your company. Also, I'd like someone in this building whose first loyalty is the truth. Then I'll sign, I said, and I did. She squeezed my shoulder once and, in a rare betrayal of her brand, let herself smile openly. Good. Word must have traveled on some quiet frequency, because when I left my office, the corridor wasn't empty the way it usually was. Engineers, researchers, admin staff, people I knew only by first name and coffee order, stood scattered along the hall pretending to check phones or adjust glasses. Someone started clapping. It spread, not loud, not ceremonial. A soft, stubborn sound that said, "We see you." I didn't cry. Not there. In the nursery, though, when I bent over Noah's crib and he looked up with milk on his chin and pure approval in his eyes, that almost got me. By afternoon, my calendar held a different shape. Meetings about ethics training, infrastructure for anonymous reporting, a volunteer committee for data transparency. People showed up who, 2 weeks earlier, would have hidden. A junior analyst confessed to pressure to round up timelines. A lab manager admitted she let a favored contractor skip compliance forms. We talked. We built systems that assumed humans would be human and still insisted they could also be better. Make it simple, I wrote on the whiteboard. Make it survivable. Make it real. 3 sentences, a job description. Later that week, I took Noah to the park. The world had the audacity to be beautiful. Spring had found the city's edges and softened them. The sky was a blue that felt like it would forgive you for a few things. We sat under a tree and shared a bag of grapes like millionaires. A kite made an earnest attempt at philosophy overhead. For a full hour, I didn't look at my phone. When I finally did, there was a message from Jackson. In the conference room at 6, no agenda, just air. I wrote back, "You bribed me with air once already. Fine." He was waiting with the lights low and the blinds half drawn. The city making geometry on the glass. No tie, sleeves rolled. He had a talent for looking like a rendering of responsibility in a real person at the same time. Director Jensen, he said. Stop, I said. He stopped. We sat. For a minute, we didn't pretend small talk could carry this particular day. The table remembered other versions of us. War, bait, evidence, and that terrible calm before the fall. You know, he said eventually, when you texted me for $50, I was 2 minutes away from changing my number. I'd convinced myself my phone was a liability. Your phone was a liability, I said. I was just the right one. He laughed, low and honest. I keep thinking about that first night, a message that should have bounced. And now, he gestured to the entire kite-flecked universe. Now we're rebuilding a company. With cupcakes, I said. With cupcakes, he agreed. He reached into a folder and slid something across the table. It was the photo again, our first text, printed and framed, only this time the handwriting beneath the lines was mine. I'll pay you back, I had written then. Underneath it now, in my crooked letters. We did. He watched my face, and because it was just us and the city and the glass, I didn't hide the way it hit me. I have something else, he said, and his voice changed. Less CEO, more person about to walk out onto a metaphorical ledge. It's not a contract or a policy, it's a question. All right, I said, because bravery is mostly showing up. When this slows down, he said, when we're steady, would you and Noah come over for dinner? No work, no agenda. I can cook exactly 3 things, 2 of which are edible. I should have expected the question. It still hit with the gentle force of a door finally deciding to open. It's been a long few months, I said carefully, and we've been honest about the work. We should be honest about the rest, too. He waited, which I was starting to realize was one of the better things he did. Yes, I said simply. Dinner, not a headline, not a story, just dinner. He exhaled, the way people do when the answer matches the hope. Then we have a plan, he said. Make it survivable, I murmured, and he smiled like he'd been in the room earlier when I wrote it. We stood. Neither of us moved toward the door immediately. Gravity is complicated when the ground is finally steady. On my way out, Ava intercepted me with a document for signature and a look I couldn't read. You told him yes, didn't you? She asked blandly. To what? Cupcakes, she said, deadpan, then softer. I'm glad you're staying. Me too, I said, and surprised myself with how unafraid that sounded. A week later, the state AG held a brief press conference. Charges accepted. Cooperation ongoing. Systemic reforms at Helix Core cited as a model. Reporters tried to draw me out. I issued a single statement Keller wrote, and I meant, courage is often administrative. We filed the forms. We celebrated with lunch trays and paper plates in a break room that had never hosted anything that mattered. Engineers explained rules of a card game no one understood. Someone brought a lopsided cake decorated in blue icing with the words, "No more ghosts." It tasted like sugar and relief. That night, when the building was mostly empty, I took the long way around the 37th floor. The nursery lights were dim. Noah's breathing was the metronome of the room. I stood with my palm on the glass for a moment and let myself consider the smaller math of life. Ounces, naps, the soothing power of a mobile that rotated the same 5 stars forever. At my desk, a small box waited. No label. Inside, a key on a plain ring and a card with Ava's tidy handwriting. Shadow route access, but for good reasons now. Late-night printer jams, urgent chocolate runs, rescue missions involving toy foxes. A postscript. P.S. Please don't make me regret my sentimentality. I put the key on my chain and texted a photo of it to her. I'm keeping this for the chocolate. Her reply arrived instantly. I expected nothing less. At home, I taped the framed text to the wall near my desk, above a line of sticky notes that were slowly evolving into a philosophy. Assume sunlight. Document anyway. Believe the quiet thing first. Noah fell asleep, gripping my finger, a habit he hadn't had as a newborn because hunger had taken both of our hands. I kissed his forehead and told him the story again. Not the press version, Not the think pieces, our version. A mistake that insisted on being a beginning. A meal paid forward and back. A company that learned how to say, "We're sorry," without parentheses. When the night settled, my phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number. No threat this time. No bait. A photograph of the Helix lobby plaque. Building forward honestly. Beneath it, a single line. Make sure they earn it. Keller, probably. Or Ava. Or the part of me that refuses to outsource a conscience. I set the phone face down and looked out at the city. The same city where I'd once counted coins in a laundry room and memorized the price of formula by heart. The same city that had room for a wrong number and a right choice. The same city that kept insisting that redemption is nothing more than a series of small, unfancy actions you repeat until trust grows muscle again. I thought of dinner and work and the unforeseen luxury of ordinary futures. "Thank you," I said aloud to a quiet apartment, and meant it for more people than I could name. The fox blanket fell from the chair. I folded it and left it by the door, because tomorrow would be another day with bottles and budgets and a new kind of peace, the kind you build, the kind that lasts. And because somewhere in the warehouse of my life there will always be the first text, humble, mortifying, and true, I let myself say it one more time, just to honor the hinge. "I'm sorry to bother you. I need help." Sometimes the universe writes back. Sometimes you do.